Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you're at on the planet, I wish you a happy time of day. So today, oh gosh, we didn't have a show last Saturday. We didn't have a show last Saturday, guys, because I was doing a talk on ACT for a bunch of kids on how to prepare properly for ACT science reasoning over at a college nearby. So they asked me to pop in and talk about how to be successful in testing on that. So that was awesome. They gave me candy. They gave me candy and they gave me bottled water, and they also gave me granola bars. So apparently I work for food now. So, and water, which is awesome. Which is fine. But it's a bunch of underprivileged teens. And so I was working with them to help them. To everybody in the chat here, we got Exiled. Hello, afternoon. Greetings and salutations, Doc. Doc Fearsome. Florist, what's up? Critical Cripple. You barked at me. So I'm going to say a woof back. Good morning, Tony Designs. Hey, Sash. Hey, Keon. What's up, guys? So today, we're going to talk, and this is not a new topic for me. I've actually covered this topic extensively in the past. If you go on ScientistMel.com/articles, you'll find an article that I wrote about narcissistic behaviors. Hey, Doc Savage. How are you? So Doc's in the chat. So be certain, I'm going to give a little shout out to a show PvP is going on this afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Time, I believe. PvP with Omni Eris. He's a doll, and we adore Doc here. And then Sunday, guys, we're going to have Landon Knoll on Oral Audacity. So yeah. General Custer. I'm not certain. General Custer, won't say much about that, but I'll tell you what, Doc Savage, I will hit you up with some information when I chat with you tomorrow before the show. So do check out Sunday Oral Audacity featuring Landon Knoll. We're also going to have, after that, at the end of this month, we're going to have Miles Power. So Miles Power, huge YouTuber who debunks a lot of bad science. We're going to talk about big pharma myths. Big pharma myths. That'll be fun. I know Doc will have a lot to say about that. So Miles Power will be on. Also, the following Sunday, The secret handshake. We got a secret handshake. You know, if you're part of the club, you might know the secret handshake. So we also have Tony Reed coming on the beginning of December, followed by Dr. Amanda Glaze, who does evolution education. And so I've had her on the show before. And she's been on Spirited Science. I've done a podcast episode with her. She's quite amazing. And she tries to, a lot of her research centers around teaching evolution to those who are resistant to it. So fascinating topic. Absolutely amazing woman. She's on Twitter at EvoPhD. Go give her a follow. And so we might have some interesting fake commercials on for her show, particularly one of the rewriting the textbooks. That was neat. So today we're going to talk about online narcissists. I've mentioned this before in articles I've written on my website. In addition to that, I have an episode on social media addiction that tends to be prevalent among narcissists. I've also discussed this in another episode on trolling with the dark tetrad. So let's go ahead and pull up the topics for today. Let's see, what are we going to talk about? Narcissists, online narcissists. What are they? What do they do? How does this apply online? And how can you protect yourself? So having been a person who's been subjected to narcissistic behavior on multiple occasions, I think, it's all anecdotal, but fear not. I do actually have quite a bit of information. So let me just say, social media and online forums are a hotbed for narcissists. And often the toxic types mean to do damage. So today I'm going to talk about narcissistic personality disorder and how it relates to online behavior. I'm also going to talk about what you can do if a narcissist is actively working to damage you, your reputation, all kinds of different things. We call it narcissistic rage. So I'm pulling from other episodes where I have discussed this as, so it's not really a new topic, as I'd mentioned for my show. I've previously discussed it in the topic of social media addiction, narcissists online, and trolls. I have multiple sources, primarily peer-reviewed articles, and there are some trade sites that I've pulled from, like Psychology Today. They're listed at the end of this talk. So let's break it down. This is what we're going to talk about. Okay. Narcissistic personality disorder. This is a heckin' huge topic, guys. So it's exaggerated self-importance. The people often tend to feel entitled. Entitled is a new word. I make up new words all the time on the show. It's great. Narcissists, they have a need for constant and excessive admiration. They often exaggerate their talents and their worth and their achievements and things like that. They are very, very, very preoccupied with fantasies involving success, power, brilliance, and beauty. They believe that they're superior to other people. They have this perception. And here's an important thing. They will only associate with equally special people. So they work to associate with people they feel are superior. Now, they tend to monopolize conversations, and they will actually belittle people that they perceive as inferior. They'll insult them. They'll say all kinds of ugly things, and they also expect special favors. Now, with this, they will also expect unquestioning compliance. They don't want you to question why they've asked for a thing, which I'll get to that in a bit, what happens when you don't comply. They tend to take advantage of others, and they believe others are envious of them, but actually, they're quite envious of other people. They're arrogant, haughty, conceited, boastful, pretentious. There are all of these different things, and they insist on having the best things. And if they can't have the best things, they will pretend that they have the best things. So let's kind of dive down a bit further about this. These are all different types of signs and symptoms associated with narcissism. There's this exaggerated sense of self-importance. You got to kind of think about, when it comes to narcissists, they have little to no self-worth, and they have to exude this. And so in order to keep this appearance up, they have to exaggerate what they do and who they are. And they have this entitlement. And in order to keep this self-importance up, they have to have validation from others, which is a constant and excessive type of, I need to be reinforced by this. But they'll spend a lot of time talking about how brilliant they are, or how smart they are, or beautiful people that hang around them, or the smart people. Look at all these smart people that hang around me, which kind of goes into the superiority idea, that they think they're superior, and they will only interact with other people that they feel are superior. So it's kind of interesting. And it's interesting with narcissists, because they will be inherently charming, and they will go above and beyond to get the attention of somebody that they feel is superior. And they will do things as a means to say, see how I'm worth something to you. And they'll insert themselves in situations to where they can go, I'm worth something to you. See how much I'm worth. You have to have me in order to do these particular things. You're going to need this, or, so they'll go through and they'll insert themselves. So it's interesting, having been a person who's been subjected to narcissists, they usually kind of, how is, and people have asked me this before. They're like, Mel, you're so clever. How could you have been fooled by this person? Well, you have to have a bit of self-reflection here. If you're being hoodwinked, swindled, taken advantage of by a narcissistic person who behaves, often with that rage, it looks like sociopath. It looks like a sociopathic type of behavior. And often, the two can be conflated. You can have a sociopath that is a narcissist, but there's pure narcissism, and then there's sociopaths that kind of have narcissism as well.
Tommy Hall comes to mind. That fool Tommy Hall. The arrogance that he exudes is just ridiculous. It really is.
Yes, and if you have not watched that particular episode, please hop over to the Geek Room, where Frank to this day apologizes for putting me opposite Tommy Hall, but it's a riot. I go back and it was like the 2-year anniversary of that at one point in time, and I was like, oh wow, it's the 2-year anniversary of this, Frank, and he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Mel. But I adore the guys and lady at the Geek Room. They're part of our brother and sisterhood of podcasts through Bull. So it's kind of neat. So, this over self-importance. And so that's why, particularly with individuals like Tommy Hall and G-Man and other people who are starting to fall into that category of people not worth my time, I'm very cautious about who I get in an online room with, because I don't want to validate that entitlement or that sense of self-importance, particularly if they get my time, or if they get any kind of reaction from me, or any kind of engagement, then that validates them to a degree. I've always been very careful about who I engage with. But sometimes, if you are being swindled or hoodwinked or, or actively being used by a narcissist, it requires a bit of self-reflection in that you have a hole that the narcissist is filling. Narcissists can be pretty calculating sometimes, and sometimes they don't even realize that this is what they're doing. They don't know or have a word for that. So for me, the time that I have been absolutely victimized by a narcissist was that narcissist entered my life at a time where I had just been assaulted. And so I was coping with a trauma, and they inserted themselves into the situation, made them important. Look at how important I am. I'm being supportive and caring. And they'll have a bit of that, guys. So it's interesting to me now that I've learned, and it took a lot of learning and through the work of going to therapy. Therapists are amazing. People are like, I can't go to a therapist. That makes me weak. No. Therapists, my therapist has been amazing at helping me learn how to deal with people, how to deal with vitriolic content and things like that, the ugly things people say about me, how to deal with that. My therapist also given me fantastic work advice. You wouldn't think so. Office politics, if you have a hard time, go talk to your therapist. If you need to be able to have a conversation with your boss or somebody else at work, talk to a therapist. They can give you fantastic advice on how to go about resolving some kind of conflict, whether it's at work or in a personal setting. If you're needing to find a job, how can you be more dynamic in your interviews? Oh my God, therapists are amazing. I love my therapist. I see her about once a month now, just to kind of check in. Because, being an online person, and with the growing work that I'm doing, and you guys may not see everything that I'm doing online, but I am getting involved a lot in my community, boosting science literacy and trying to help people be successful in STEM academia and in their careers. So there's a lot of stuff that I do that culminates and is part of my work online. And I'm proud of that. And so since I'm growing, even freaking David Tennant, you guys know David Tennant, Doctor Who, the 10th Doctor, got it right here. All right. He had to go to therapy at the beginning of Doctor Who, because it blew up so fast. He couldn't cope. And he didn't know how to cope with being recognized everywhere. That's fair, So go to a therapist. Check them out. They're freaking amazing. Okay, so back to narcissists. Everybody, I need to be clear about this. There's a healthy level of narcissism. You need a healthy level of narcissism. It kind of helps keep you in check. But when it gets out of hand, when it gets over the top and becomes a problem, a lot of the times narcissists will not go and get help, because that will require them to self-reflect. That will require them to look at themselves and see, what happens. What is that hole? What is that thing that's causing them to think so little of themselves? So let me catch up on the chat. Oh gosh, let's see. I'm catching up on the chat here. What's the opposite of narcissist? I'm not certain. Maybe a very humble person, who understands their self-worth. And is that my mug cracks you up? I actually have cracked up my mug, Exiled. Take a look at that. I've cracked up my mug. A little piece broke off, but still works. It's broken, but it's Batman. Batman's broken in so many ways. We could have a whole discussion just on the psychosis, or the psyche, not psychosis, but psyche associated with Batman. Now, wait, don't we all want to be with peers, superiors for our own edification? Yes. The difference between one, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. That's what I've always kind of thought. I want to be around people that I can grow with and learn. Narcissists that's not why they want people who are their superiors. They associate themselves with superiors. And they need that. because they have very little self-esteem. They have very little self-esteem. So they have to surround themselves with people who they feel are better than them in order to feel, superior. I have known many narcissists, Flores. I've really known many narcissists. And they're easy to spot. Once you get used to seeing it, they're very easy to spot. And I'm going to talk a bit about how narcissists coincide with online behavior. Y'all make narcissism sound bad, but by definition, it doesn't seem too bad. Well, let me get into what happens if you criticize them, or, if they have trouble handling anything. What happens if you criticize them? Because that's a big thing. Or if you catch them in a thing, because that can be a problem. If you don't have something stellar to say about a narcissist, or if you criticize something that they've done or their behavior, or question something that they're doing, they have an emotional response. They have, and often it's narcissist. The narcissist does not have self-love. You don't have self-worth. So they have to pretend that they do. And if you question this facade of self-worth, that forces them to self-reflect, which is something that they want to do because it's painful. It's exceedingly painful for a narcissist to have their fantasy world crumble down, because then they're like, oh my God, I have to rebuild this fantasy world that I have. These other people are they're gonna see that I'm a nobody. Really, I can't have that. I can't have that. They won't address why they feel like they're a nobody. They won't address their low self-esteem and why that's there. They won't get help. So they spend energy convincing everybody else how amazing they are, rather than focusing that energy on themselves. So that's the difference. I go to a therapist to keep me in check too, so let's see. Jericho D, would you allow me to use small clips of this vid? I will include links to you. You know what? Hit me up on Twitter and talk to me about, what your vid is, and I'll be happy to help if it's like a good educational video. So just let me know. You can hit me up here. I'm also on various Discords, and I do have a Discord, guys. I think I updated the link below. If not, I can get you a new one. All right, let me see. I'm going to catch up. The opposite of narcissist is writing it backwards. Good one, Tony Designs. I like that. My low self-esteem is superior. Awesome. I'm proud of you, RB. Get me back in the stream. Okay, so we're all right. So sad people just can't admit they're a flawed human. I'm a flawed human, but I also rely on people. Okay. When it comes to criticism, and when it comes to things like this, and I'm about to talk about what happens with narcissists when you criticize them. But for me, I get criticism and I do listen to the criticism, but it's important to have educated ears and eyes, and you filter criticism. For me, number one, is the criticism helpful? If it's not helpful, okay, two, what's the motive behind it? Is this person actually wanting to contribute to me being a better human? Have they historically shown that to me? Do they have sufficient evidence to support what they're saying? Also, are they offering you a solution on how to move forward with the criticism? If they're not working to help you find a solution to the situation as well, then it's not worth it. So it's important to kind of go through and filter criticism with educated ears and eyes, and kind of ask yourself those questions. When I think of narcissists, I always think of the Brian Blackwell case in the UK. Narcissists get a start at an early age. They tend to. And there are some environmental factors. There's some genetics associated with that. But see, that's going to come down to the treatment is psychotherapy. And a narcissist is not going to go to a psychotherapist willingly. Usually it has to be somebody that is important to them enough for them to go to therapy in order to kind of deal with the intrinsic issues that they have.
They almost have to be coerced initially. Like you have to convince them that
yes,
you're not going to do what they need you to do for them, for example, unless they go to the therapist and take it seriously.
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about what happens when you start to chip away at their facade, at the world that they've built in order to boost their ego and show everybody how important they really are. So people with this particular disorder, they have trouble handling anything that can be perceived as criticism. It could be a very mild comment that they perceive as criticism, to where they would fly off the handle. Oh, that's Bull's voice. That's Bull's voice, by the way. All right. So they can become impatient or even angry if they don't get their special treatment. So we mentioned before that they feel entitled to special treatment, particularly if they've shown you how important they are to you and you don't do a thing for them. They're going to get angry that they don't get this special treatment. They can have significant interpersonal problems and they easily feel slighted. So they will feel slighted at the smallest little things. They will react with what we call narcissistic rage and contempt, and they will try to belittle the other person to make themselves appear superior. They often do a thing called projection. Often you will see with a narcissist, they will accuse other people of the things that they do. Now, keep in mind, the narcissist is refusing to be self-aware. They're refusing to reflect on their own behavior, and they will absolutely not take responsibility for anything that they do. They also have difficulty regulating their emotions. Some of them cannot control their behavior. And so they'll lash out if somebody they feel is particularly superior to them, and they felt like that they didn't give me my special treatment. They criticized me and hurt my feelings. If it's one of their superiors that they feel like they're associating with who criticizes them a little, they'll lash out and they'll, talk ugly about them. They can fall into what we call narcissistic rage. I'll get into a bit more of the particularly pernicious and awfulness that can happen with that. They have big problems dealing with stress and adapting to change. They often feel depressed, so they can have depression and anxiety coupled together because they fall short of the perfection that they want everybody else to see. Oftentimes they have these secret feelings of insecurity and shame and vulnerability and humiliation. All of these different things kind of motivate them to convince everybody else how wonderful and smart and brilliant and amazing they are, and how hot their partners are, and how beautiful. Look at all these beautiful people that are around me, and these smart people that are around me. They need that in order to reinforce their self-worth, because they don't have any intrinsically. So let's have a look at what that means. Explicit versus implicit. So they exude this high self-esteem, but they have very little self-esteem. So it's explicit that they are saying and doing all of these things. Look at how smart I am. Look at these smart people around me. Look at these beautiful people around me. They think nothing of themselves. It's actually quite sad. So, it's just like, oh my gosh. It's like I pity narcissists. I do, because a lot of them have had some kind of trauma associated with maybe a childhood or something, or there's some evidence to show that there's a parental facet in the development of a narcissist. So let me catch up on the chat here a bit and see what you guys are having to say. So, alrighty, let me see. I'm catching up. Okay. Unfounded criticism is different. It is different, RB. You're absolutely right. The stream keeps freezing. I don't know. Okay, so it's freezing for a couple of people. Sorry. Let's see. Bull is the best thing to come out of. Bull's awesome, and I'm glad I have him on my show. He makes my job so much easier here. I just put things together, and then he puts them together in stream, so it's nice. So let's see. Here. Let's see. I think it's here. It's your life.
They're going to turn me into a narcissist. They're feeding my ego by saying I'm the best thing to come out of NSS, and then they go on to say I was the only thing to come out of it. So fuck. Sorry,
oh my
I didn't
goodness.
need to cuss on this show. I don't want to cuss too much on this.
Okay, my Saturday show we don't swear so much, but that's all right. Bull, you get a freebie there. Sundays, I don't hold Doc back at all. I'm actually going to. Well, there's the dark tetrad, Fiona. So I'm actually going to get into a little bit of that. Is the science of narcissism considered a soft science or hard science? Well, you could, when it comes to narcissism, that's a behavior. So that would be more of a psychology, psychiatry type of thing, which could be considered a soft science, but you also have neurology aspects associated with that. So that would be the harder science. But to be quite frank, I have lots of sources associated with this, and particularly with the present. There's a lot of literature just on narcissism because it's been studied for so long in psychiatry as well as psychology. So it's a behavior science. So you look for patterns and behavior associated with people who are afflicted with narcissistic personality disorder. So there's a lot of meta-analyses, that sort of thing. As far as behaviors online, first thing we had to do is kind of talk about what narcissism is. And so I feel like I've kind of done that. But we also need to talk about how this applies to people online. And that's where a lot of my sources come from. So when we get to that, I have around 14 or 15 sources just for this talk that I've done. And I'll show them to you here in just a bit. I left off Pew Research. I'm going to talk a bit about Pew Research. And if you're more curious about troll behavior in social media addiction, I have 2 other different shows that I've already done just on this. So let's see. Okay. So there has been, with all of the studies that I'm talking about, there has been an increasing amount of science associated with narcissists and social media use. They tend to be highly active on Twitter, Facebook, and other online forums. These social media sites fill a need to be connected with others, and they also allow a space to generate multiple accounts. Facebook requires some kind of reciprocity and friending, so high numbers of friends kind of feeds that ego. Twitter does not require anyone to befriend you. You can develop a large amount of followers, but high numbers of tweets and the content of the tweets, as well as the high amount of followers, can have a correlation a little bit with narcissism, particularly if that's what a narcissist values is. Look at all the people that follow me. Look at all the people that agree with me. Look at all these people here that reinforce my idea. Let's talk a little bit about social media. So there's an inherently interesting thing about social media. It's a constant stream of feedback, There's no natural off cue. It's not like, regular TV shows before we had streaming. You could just watch a show and then you have to wait a week. Or if you read a book, you reach the end of a chapter and you can stop. There's no natural pause. You have to make yourself put it down and walk away. And so it also gives this instant reward. So the moment somebody responds to you, you get a notification. You're like, oh, look, somebody liked my comment. Somebody said this. Somebody liked the picture that I posted. Somebody liked what I have to say about this. Look at this smart person who liked this tweet that I had that I said. Look at this person, they're talking about me. So it's this constant stream of feedback is something that is particularly of interest to a narcissist. So let's talk a little bit about a narcissist on social media. So going to the next one, a little bit of the research. What does the research say? Narcissists tend to be social media addicts. There's research to show that a person who spends a lot of time on various social media sites tends to have narcissistic traits. This gratification, this instant reward, and we know that there's a reward system in our brain. It's part of our limbic system, that dopamine that releases because somebody liked what we had to say. This can actually feed that type of addiction. And it's easy to develop a fantasy world. It's really easy because when it comes to being online, the only thing those people see is what you tell them. So you can develop a completely made up world just to influence everybody else and show them how amazing you are. So let me catch up a bit on the chat here. Let's see, before I dig in a bit. I'm seeing bacon, guys. Bacon, and I didn't have bacon for breakfast, and now I'm jealous. That iPad is huge, isn't it? You know, he's taking the selfie in that one. Let's see. How many subtypes do you know in the narcissism spectrum? I only know 2, but I know they cover almost none of the whole spectrum. To be honest, I'm not a clinician, but that is a really good question. How about I write that down and follow up on that and get back with you some information on that, Darth Killer, if that's okay. Again, I kind of pulled stuff from other streams that I've done about narcissists in their presence and trolling behavior, as well as social media addiction. And I focus primarily on the online presence of narcissists and what they do in order to use that particular medium to kind of feed their particular disorder. But I am curious. So that's a very good question, Darth. Let me see what I can find. And if you're cool with it, message Twitter. My DMs are open, and shoot me a little reminder, because if I don't, and I don't have a pen with me right now, so I didn't write it down. So please do shoot me up later. Hit me up with a message and I will see what I can find. So thank you for that question. Let's see. Okay, the stream was wigging out, but it's okay now. So Darth, hit me up on Twitter if you can and remind me. Bacon jealousy is the best jealousy. Gosh, Nana, what's up? You're having bacon. Oh, God. Man, you know what? I'm jealous. I am envious of your bacon. Oh, wow. Reminds me of a YEC who's known for his multiple accounts. He had about 30 last month, keeps popping up, and been doing it for a year at least. Well, here's something that's interesting. And here, let's talk a little bit about that. When it comes to narcissists, they require a buy-in to their fantasy world, and you have to buy it. They're skilled at lying because they've been doing it for a long time. And so when people are like, how could you fall for a narcissist that one time? You know, it was like 3 years ago. You have to buy it in, and they have to be really good at it. So the ones that tend to come towards me are the ones that actually manage to do damage to me, which there's only been one of those, because I learned. I learned and I grew from the experience through the help of professionals, including legal and therapy. And I've learned so much, and it's amazing. But you have to buy into their fantasy world. So they will have a lot of falsified fake evidence, and they'll misrepresent a lot of it in order to reinforce their facade. And often they buy into their own lies. Their fantasy world feeds their ego. The anonymity involved with being online allows the narcissist to create their own world where they can convince others how amazing they are. They make sock accounts where they praise themselves, presenting the illusion that so many people agree with them, and that all these people praise them and say how smart they are. They rely on this fantasy world to make them feel worthy. If any questioning occurs, this requires them to face a reality involving their crippling low self-esteem. They cannot face reality, as this means they will have to address the awful feelings they have of themselves. So that's something that is particularly hard for a narcissist to have to go through. They don't want to self-reflect, and they're not going to take responsibility for their behavior. So let's look at trolling for a second. Now, Fiona, this is where I'm going to talk about the dark tetrad. Trolls will lie, exaggerate, and offend just to get a response. So initially, I found about this research on Psychology Today because they reported on the study, but then I actually found the study. So in my sources, you can go and check out the study as well. So Psychology Today reported on a study to find out what trolls have in common in regard to psyche. There was a study that was done with Canadian researchers that conducted 2 online studies with over 1,200 people, giving personality tests to each subject along with a survey about their internet commenting behavior. They wanted evidence that linked trolling with the dark tetrad of personality traits. Now, this dark tetrad involves narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. The dark tetrad scores were the highest among people who state trolling as their favorite internet activity. Their scores were substantial for all 4 traits. These particular individuals, now keep in mind, this is a dark tetrad. These particular individuals have are basically sadistic narcissists with psychopathic tendencies. So when you're dealing with a person who's online, and if they become particularly toxic and start trolling you, and they can lead into what we would consider abuse. So let me catch up on the chat really quickly. Let's see. Twitter is infested with narcissists. Yes, it is, as is Facebook. There are studies to show Facebook and Twitter, just social media in general, narcissists, they're pretty prevalent on Facebook, but Twitter, they're also there too, in quite a large amount. Yes, trolling doesn't always make someone a narcissist, right? Although it is a narcissist who is a troll. You can troll, but if that's the only thing that you do with your life, and that's the exclusive thing that you do that gives you joy, then there's a problem there. Dark tetrad sounds like the bad guys from a Pokemon game. Might very well be, but do check it out, and you can read the paper as well. And I have links at the end of this talk, and I'll show you all the stuff that kind of built what I'm talking about. So let's talk about narcissistic rage. Rawr. And I'm not trying to make fun of it. This is a legitimate thing. So when we're dealing with a narcissistic rage, it is their response to being challenged. You remove them from your group of friends, and or whether they're a romantic interest or a friend or any kind of like that. If you remove them from your group, and or if you criticize them, you could end up receiving quite a bit of what we call narcissistic rage. So what happens when you criticize or question a narcissist? Okay, let's talk a bit more about this. And I'm going to catch up on the chat too. Oh my goodness. We went over it in Psych 101 and Social Psych. Yeah, a lot of narcissists are posed but hide it well. Yeah, they could be. That would make sense. So what happens when you criticize or question a narcissist? They are troubled enough by your comments, they could fall into trolling you into a toxic level of harassment. How does this manifest? Well, there is a lot of information on the internet. A good go-to that's pretty easy to read. You can find some information on it in Psychology Today. Now, some of the responses that they have, particularly with narcissistic rage, they often go to verbal abuse. So you could get posts, online posts that are belittling, bullying. They accuse you of things. They blame, shame, demand, threaten, criticize. They use sarcasm. They rage. They have opposing comments. They undermine, interrupt you, blocking and name calling. So this can all happen on any social media site. Isn't all rage narcissistic rage? I don't think so. I don't. There's narcissistic rage as a response to criticism or questioning. I don't rage on people when somebody asks me a question or questions something that I'm saying. I think it's quite different.
There's other things that can cause rage, though, like if somebody kills a loved one. Is that narcissistic rage? If you go out and commit a murder, a crime of passion, is that narcissistic rage? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. So many people occasionally make demands, and they'll use this sarcasm, criticize and blame, or even block you. But consider the context, malice, and frequency of the behavior before you label it narcissistic abuse. So how frequently does it happen? So that's one thing. If you see it frequently, if you see a person behaving this way towards other people a lot, and not just the same person, but lots of different people, particularly if it's associated with criticism or questioning, might be narcissistic abuse. I would say it was a pretty strong indicator of that. They'll resort to manipulation. So this is kind of like an indirect influence on someone to behave a way that kind of furthers the goals of the manipulator. So it can be expressed as like this covert aggression. So this wolf in sheep's clothing. So they can seem pretty harmless, even complimentary at first. But underneath, you kind of feel demeaned, and there's like a sense of a hostile intent. You might have experienced some manipulation when you're growing up, and this may be a way to recognize it. So, there is more information available online if you're kind of wanting to see a bit of what manipulation looks like. Emotional blackmail. That can include threats, anger, warnings, intimidation, or even punishment. It's a form of manipulation that kind of incites you or influences you to doubt yourself. You start to feel fear, guilt, obligation. And so there's that emotional blackmail, and they'll punish you. So narcissists will punish you for saying words or criticizing them or questioning them. That's one form of punishment they can do. Gaslighting. Boy, gaslighting. I know all about that, having been experienced that. It's based on a film called Gaslight. And essentially, gaslighting, what it is the film was a husband and a wife, and every morning the husband would dim the lights just a little bit, and the wife would say, "I'm sorry, is it dimmer in here?" And I'm like, "No, it's you're just imagining things." And so he continued to do that, and it drove her insane. So gaslighting is basically a way to intentionally make you distrust your perception of reality, and even making you think that you're mentally incompetent. They will sit there and they'll say, well, that is your perception of things, but that's not what the real that's not what the reality is. This is what you think, but you're wrong because that's not actual reality. You can present them with evidence and say, you said this thing. You said this thing to me, and here's the evidence of you saying this thing. It was like, that's what you think, that's what I said, but you know that's not what I meant. You know better than that. And so they put a lot of that blame back on you, and it makes you doubt yourself and your perception of reality. That's gaslighting, and it's particularly awful. So beware of that. Always believe the evidence. That's how you keep from being gaslighted against. So competition, one-upping, always trying to be on top. So it can be unethical, means cheating. They're trying to one-up you, almost like a scar comparison to a degree, or a peeing contest, a little bit of that. Super chat came in. Thank you. Is it of Lamio? I hope I said that. Are you familiar?
I think it's Oflamio, to be honest.
Oflamio. Awesome. Thank you for the $10 super chat. Are you familiar with the online narcissist known as Ghost Politics, aka Ghostler? He is a bigot and a scammer. I'm not familiar with that, but I'm not. So if you have information for that for me, please do send me some information. I'm always willing to learn, and I always like to learn more things. And if you have other resources that I haven't discussed, or if there's other studies that contradict what I've said, please send them to me, because I'd really like to read that. So, and thank you of Flamio for that super chat. I hope you guys like my little super chat dudes that pop up. So what are other things? We're not done with the things that of narcissistic rage, guys. They have negative contrasting. So they unnecessarily make comparisons to negatively contrast you with the narcissist or other people. And so they'll make comparisons to try to show you in a negative light. They sabotage. They work in sabotage. And it's not just the Beastie Boys song. I feel like I should be playing that right now. Essentially, what we mean by sabotage is this disruptive interference to disrupt your endeavors, whether it's in relationships or, for the purpose of revenge or even personal advantage. So they will sabotage what you're trying to do. If it's online, they will, and you have a particular purpose of what you do with your social media and your presence online. Excuse me. They will sabotage that, and they will also work to destroy your relationships. Needs are not as important as their need to have their ego inflated. They will lie and lie and lie and lie through this essentially persistent deception. And this is all to avoid responsibility, or, just they don't want to take responsibility for their actions. They don't want to self-reflect. So they're going to lie, and they'll continue to do so to achieve their own ends. They will withhold things. So if you're in a relationship with them, or even if it's just online, if you're friends online with them and you question them, they'll withhold communication with you, or affection, or time. They'll completely ice you out, just as a means of punishment for your questioning and criticism. They'll often neglect. This is really particularly awful if you have a parent that's a narcissist, because they will ignore the needs of a child. So this can be shown in negligent abuse, but they will ignore your needs as an adult, and they won't take any kind of responsibility for themselves. They will invade your privacy and completely ignore boundaries. They'll look through your things. We can see this particularly when you've blocked a person on social media. They'll generate a new account and comb through your timeline, kind of invading your privacy. And, they'll, if denying your physical privacy, and even they can even go as far as stalking and following you in meat space, as they say, and just ignoring your privacy as well. Oh my goodness. Stupid Horror Energy just gave us $5. Am I familiar with the online narcissist as Bullionator, aka Bull Boy? Oh my goodness. Bull, didn't you know this entire episode is just about you?
Of course God. It's about me. Of course it's about me. It's always about me.
It is always about you. You're so vain. I bet you think this stream is about you.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, Carly. And thank you, Stupid Horror Energy, for that $5. In addition to that, character assassination, guys. And I know this is probably going to be a bit of a longer stream than usual. There's so much information available, and I want to make certain I get all of this accurate and that I'm interacting and answering your questions. Character assassination or slander. This is very common. They'll spread malicious gossip or lies about you to other people. And they'll do this to people that you know. They'll even and I'll get into, this is where we can get into triangulation. So I'll go ahead and touch on triangulation. Narcissists will enlist other people to spread this slander and stalk your timelines on your social media. They'll enlist other people to go and read what you're doing and report back to them. I know this. I've been through this before a couple of times. This is what we call triangulation. They will completely demonize you to other people that are their friends. They'll convince them of things. They'll convince them of and they'll have evidence. I use that loosely. Usually it's misrepresented conversations, misrepresented messages. They'll just kind of hack up into pieces and say, look at this. This person is not nice at all. They're awful. And so out of loyalty, and because these people are now kind of like human tools to the narcissist, they will go out of loyalty because this is their friend, and they'll read the timeline. Oh, look, she's so abusive, or he's so abusive. We've got to go and watch and see what they're saying. And then they'll report back. So they will invade your privacy. And they won't even, and a lot of times they don't even realize that they're actually harassing and stalking people because they think they're doing a good thing for their friend. So that makes it particularly awful. And then when these people find out that they were used as tools as an attempt to harm another person, you have a whole separate issue there. Now they have feelings of guilt and blame, like they went after another person and stalked and harassed them for the narcissist. And then they feel really poorly about it. And so you have a bit of that. Now you've got that. They can resort to violence. That's not something that would be seen online, but they can offline, particularly if they enter into your offline world. And if they're near you, they could result to violence. They could, and if you're involved in a relationship with them, that usually you can see some kind of financial abuse, whether they control you through economic domination or drain your finances through extortion. That can happen online too. Theft, manipulation, gambling, doxing, they can do that. Or accruing debt in your name, they can do that. So if they manage to get information to your social security number, or if they've gotten access to your credit card, they will abuse you financially. Maybe we can, it's just how that, but another thing that they do that's really important, guys, particularly online, they will isolate their friend. They will isolate you. If you are close to a narcissist, they will isolate you from friends, family, anybody who can get to you with evidence to show that they're harmful, because they don't want anybody who has information, who has evidence to show that they're abusive, to get to you. Now, if you're involved with a narcissist, they might even limit access to outside services to and support through control and manipulation, abuse, character assassination, or other means of abuse. Darth Killer 5. Is that euros? Or I think that's euros. Thank you, Darth Killer. The contradicting messages, do X, then don't do X, often happens with narcissism, I've heard. Be more serious, and you're too serious, you're a drag. That's gaslighting, Darth Killer. They'll tell you to do something, and then they'll tell you not to do something. Or if they do something and they've told you not to do it, they're like, no, you've misunderstood me. That's a form of gaslighting. And then the verbal abuse. Here's another interesting thing, and I'm going to bring this up a bit when we get to the Pew Internet research. Pew did an internet research survey of a whole, I think it was a few thousand people in regard to online harassment. And I've taken some of the statistics to kind of show when you start to see the doxing or the character assassination, verbal abuse, that sort of thing, gaslighting. You can see all of this pretty prevalent, and it translates quite well to the online world. So I've talked a bit about triangulation. I've talked a bit about projection. What's particularly interesting about isolation, when people see, now keep this in mind, when people see another person being harassed by an individual online, actually will modify their posts and their behavior accordingly so they themselves don't get harassed. We have a graph for that. Can you pull that up? And this is kind of where I'm getting with the isolation. People will modify their behavior so they don't get harassed by an individual. So this is from the Pew Research Center, from an online survey that was conducted in January of 2017. So more than a quarter of Americans have chosen to not post something online after seeing harassment of others. So 28% set up or adjusted privacy settings, including locking their accounts. 27% chose not to post something online for fear of harassment. 16% changed any info in online profiles, which could be as much as where they worked, who they are, what their political leanings are, that sort of thing. 13% stopped using the online service altogether. Now, keep in mind, 13%. Even if, that if it was 10%, it's 1 in 10. So 13%, right? That's pretty high. So out of 100 people, 13 people will stop using a media site. Any of these and any combinations, 47%. So they'll not choose to post something online after seeing harassment of others. Now, apply this to a person. Apply this to a person who is a friend of an individual who's harassing others, and they actively see that. Are they going to question? Are they going to comply? When you have numbers like this, where more than a quarter will choose not to post something based on what they see. Now, what if that person is close to them and has all kinds of information? So yeah, let's see. ScientistMel, don't forget the use of setting traps and fake outrage. Well, yes, that's also a little bit with trolling behavior. So we kind of see that a bit with the fake outrage and the trolling behavior, projection. So I'm going to let's kind of catch up on the chat a bit. So you guys seen the graph. You can go on pewinternet.org and look up the Internet Harassment Survey for 2017. So it's still relatively new. It's just a couple years ago, but they stay pretty up to date on stuff. So 4 in 10 U.S. adults have personally experienced harassing or abusive behavior online. 4 in 10. So 40%, 18% have been the target of severe behaviors, such as physical threats and sexual harassment. Now, often we see this as focused on personal or physical characteristics, but there's also political views, gender, physical appearance, and race are among the most common. And there's different types of harassment, and there's different levels of severity. Americans are widely aware of the issue of online harassment, and 62% of Americans consider it a major problem. And online companies are seen as key actors in addressing online harassment. So 62% consider this to be a problem. So if somebody, and it's very prevalent, 4 in 10 US adults, so it's 40% of US adults experience it, and 62% consider it a problem. Now, there's a little bit of division on free speech versus political correctness. 45% of Americans say it's more important to let people speak their minds freely online, and a slightly larger share, 53%, feels that it's more important for people to feel welcome and safe online. So, with that said, a lot of the research has come out saying that maybe more pressure should be put on social media sites to kind of dictate what's okay and what's not okay. And Twitter in particular has kind of gone through and started addressing more of this as they have modified their particular ways that they deal with that. 43% of Americans say that offensive speech online is too often excused as not being a big deal. But 56% feel that many people take offensive content online too seriously. Now, here's something interesting. Among young men, 73% of 18 to 29-year-old men feel that many people take offensive online content too seriously. So of that 56%, the majority is mostly really young men who possibly engage in this sort of behavior themselves. But within this research, within this information from Pew, here's the rub. Anonymity is seen as a facilitating factor in encouraging the spread of harassment online. 86% of online adults feel that the internet allows people to be more anonymous than is true offline. So this is up 24% from Pew's Research Center's 2014 survey. So within 3 years, it's gone up 24%. So 86% of online adults feel that internet allows people to be more anonymous than what's true. And so 54% of those harassed say their most recent incident involves someone whose real identity they did not know. And 89% of Americans say the ability to post anonymously online enables people to be cruel to or harass one another. Hello, everyone. Yes, and much of the online bad behavior gets excused as free speech. So, but that's the thing. Free speech does not mean freedom from consequence. So if you're actively harassing a person online, so if you're dealing with a narcissist who's raging, they're going to behave in ways that are particularly awful. And they can do that online with very little pushback. So let's look at those people who have faced forms of online harassment and how they differ and that sort of thing. So I have a chart for that. Again, this is from Pew Research Center. The percent of people who say their online harassment was a result of, and there's 4 main things associated with this: physical appearance, gender, race, ethnicity, and political views. Out of all of these people who have faced severe forms of online harassment, 34% included severe behaviors on physical appearance, 32% on gender, 23% on race, ethnicity, and about, they say it was 36% on political views. Now, with this percentage, this caused 45% of people to have a mental and emotional stress, problems with their friends and family, and damage to their reputation. So 24%, it actually affected their relationships, and 25%, it damaged their reputation. So people, after witnessing this online harassment, here we go. This is that bit of isolation, and people actually modifying their behavior when they see other people behave poorly like this. 56% set up and adjusted their privacy settings. So 56% of people, after witnessing online harassment, actually locked their accounts and adjusted their privacy settings. 44% responded directly to the harasser. 42% flagged offensive content. 42% offered support to a person being harassed. 42% changed any info in their online profiles. So they actually changed any pertinent information that could have been identifying or changed different types of info in their profiles. 36% reported the user to a website or platform, and 30% stopped using an online service. So let's kind of, I'm going to catch up on the chat now. Let's kind of talk a little bit about this. So people have actually changed their behavior after seeing other people after they see other people being harassed and abused online. They actually change what they say. So is this free speech really? Or is this a way, for people, they'll actually not say things for fear of being harassed? So it's pretty interesting. Darth Killer, thank you for the €5 super chat. And he says, thank you. I say it too often. Free speech is twined and comes with enslavement to consequences. One can say what he wants, but not control reactions. This is true. It's important for us to keep in mind, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences. And we see that. And so here's the thing with that. When you're dealing with people online who, and let's some of the statistics, again, from Pew Research, 26% of adults have had untrue information about them posted online, most commonly about their character or reputation. 17% most commonly about their character or reputation was about 17%. Half of that, 49% of those who had untrue information posted about them tried to get the inaccurate claims removed or corrected. And around 1 in 10 Americans, about 9%, say they have experienced mental or emotional stress because of something untrue posted about them online. Now, large majorities of internet users have heard about hacking, about 95%, and trolling, 86%, and 18% each have personally been hacked or trolled. Doxing, that is posting someone's personal information online without their consent, and swatting, which refers to calling in a fake emergency to the police, are recognized by smaller shares of the online population. Is like 73% and 55% respectively. But here's the thing. All of these types of behaviors are associated with what we call narcissistic rage. A lot of these ones, particularly in the end, where you're slandering or trying to hurt somebody's reputation, it can actually cause mental and emotional stress. And particularly if the person is a public figure or their work gets involved with this sort of thing, you can have that kind of damage actually happen. And so let me catch up on the chat, and then we're going to talk about the different ramifications that can occur with that. All right, so I'm catching up on the chat. Let's see. Oh, yes. People underestimate the work Bull does to make a show look good. He deserves all the credit for the massive improvements on my channel. Yes. Thank you, Bull. I appreciate what you do. And I do pay him. I send Bull money every month. So if you're a patron to me, that money also goes to Bull. If you're a patron to Bull, he helps me out. So it's great. Thank you for that. So yeah, much of that online bad behavior is like, am I narcissistic for using Twitter and getting lots of followers? No, not at all. And I would never presume to diagnose a person, but patterns of behavior and how they correlate with certain other psychoses are hard to ignore. What I tend to do is I just avoid those people and I try not to feed them anything. Let's see. Oh, this is actually one of my easier shows. Or Audacity is complex. And yeah. But yeah, mine is a bit more complex. And so I thank you, Bull, for helping out with that. God, Twitter can be a dumpster fire. But see, this is where I say when it comes to Twitter, it's what you make of it. I mute and I block people who are particularly awful. And if the only time somebody decides to talk to me is to criticize me, then it's like, how are you helpful? Nah, thank you. One of many reasons why I hate social media, I'm only on YouTube and Discord. That's all right. And I'm glad to have you around. But I try to be a positive person on Twitter. And I feel like that's just kind of how I am as a person too. I don't accept abuse from anybody. Nobody is immune or free to talk to me how they want on social media. It's, but my friends are not going to be awful to me. And that's not the place to do that. I've had to block and remove people because of their behavior. And that's nothing new. I've always had that policy. I have a firm set of policies that I often post on my Twitter account on why I won't engage with someone. If you just remember, nobody is entitled to you. And you don't have to engage with anybody. Nobody's entitled to a response. I treat social media like I'm at a cafe. And it's a social cafe. You sit there, somebody might come to your table and start talking to you. And you're like, okay, well, hey, how are you today? And you have a nice conversation. If they start to get rude, then I just get up and I walk away, and then I move to another table. If they follow me to that other table and want to continue that conversation when I don't want to have it, I try again. Okay, I don't want to talk to you. I get up and I move to another table. If they still come over to that table and they keep going, that's when you block, mute, whatever you need to do, particularly if they're being awful to you. And if they bring their friends in, have their friends come and you didn't listen to my friend or what have you, doesn't really matter. You're like, well, I don't want to talk to you or your friends. How dare you on a public forum? Well, I can also block and mute you. That's completely fine. That doesn't mean that I'm developing a echo chamber, because I don't. If you can engage in productive and respectful discourse, you can tell me and criticize me and we'll sit and we'll have a conversation. But the moment the arguments become circular, the moment it becomes disrespectful, the moment that you start using any kind of abusive language, I'm not going to listen to you, and your criticism is useless to me. And I don't owe you my time. But a lot of people are like, well, you shouldn't block people. It's an echo chamber. Well, if it's not useful or productive conversation, I'm not going to waste my time on those individuals. And yes, I can block and mute. That's allowed. And I can report verbal abuse as harassment. That you can do that. And people are like, well, swearing and calling you the C word and all this other stuff isn't verbally abusive, but they'll turn around and use a completely different argument when it's happening to them, which I find interesting. As a blanket rule, if you're going to swear at me, if you're going to say things that are intended, words on the internet don't really hurt me. But if the intent is to harm me, I'm not going to waste my time with you. I'm going to report it and I'm going to move on. So if you are experiencing things like that, block, mute, report any and all harassment or verbal abuse. Report all of it, because you never know. They might actually be worse to somebody else. And you might not see it. So that's just kind of how I am. It is hard to ignore people who are talking about you on the internet. It is. And when you have really nice friends who are like, look, they're saying this now. Look, they're saying this now. I've had friends go and screenshot stuff, and then I keep a file for particularly awful people in the event that it becomes stalking, which it can with narcissistic rage. If it becomes stalking, if it becomes abusive, if the intent is to harm my reputation, I will keep that in a file. And I'll keep that all together. And then if I need to, I'll file a complaint with the police and start legal action. And I have done that before. So it's nothing new. So bear that in mind, So it's not cool. So let me see. I'm catching up. Yeah, key thing, don't be creepy online, man. It's real easy. Just if you wouldn't say it to somebody's face, if you wouldn't say it to somebody in a cafe, don't say it online. It's really easy. Let's see. I do the same. People don't deserve a response. What's particularly interesting is when I leave one social media site, like I leave the cafe and then I walk over to another cafe like YouTube or Facebook, they'll follow you there and continue a conversation. So for me, in my real life world, if I have on headphones and I'm walking at the grocery, I'm around the grocery store or sitting at a cafe, somebody who follows me around store to store going, hey, talk to me. That's stalking, and that's also harassment. Don't follow people to other social media sites and flame on them, because that is the equivalent in meat space in my mind. And I think if we all kind of just take that perspective, maybe don't do that, that might lower a lot of that behavior. Hey, Tatted. All righty. I'm catching up. Let's see. I'm more the debater type. As such, I rarely block. I blocked trolls once I demonstrated that they're trolling as a serious discussion. I blocked back when blocked to help against quote mines. Yeah. But, the thing is a lot of people, particularly the narcissists, will have multiple accounts. What's really weird, and I've witnessed this before, a narcissist made like 30 plus sock accounts pretending to be a woman, pretending to be a couple, and they would talk to each other and talk to his main account. And they would be like, oh yeah, you're so great and you're awesome. He also made fake accounts to post on his blog about how great he writes. And it's absolutely bizarre. I had a Periscope once and he pretended to be a woman named Sarah and was trying to find out when I was going to be back in town again, pretending to be this woman named Sarah. So when people are like, wow, this is utterly bizarre, it's like, it totally is. But I've already been through 1,000 times worse than what I get usually on social media. So, it's like usually they'll leave you alone. So it's strange. Yeah, you're under no obligation to answer doors, phones, or emails. So it's kind of the same thing. All right, let's talk a bit about what kind of this abuse can do. So let's look at some of these things about the different types of abuse. It can cause mental, emotional stress, reputation damage, relationship damage, job or school problems, offline consequences. So there's lots of different things that can come from this. When we're talking about narcissistic rage, how do you combat this? So we've talked about all the damage that it can do. We can talk about what they do in order to elicit this damage. And if you chip away at that facade of their brilliance and their ego, their self-worth, explicit versus implicit, if you start to chip away at that, and they start to rage on you, how do you combat it? Well, here's where it's tough and it's really hard to do. So let's hop over to the next one, Bull. How do you combat this? The first thing you need to do, don't engage. And that's very difficult. As someone had mentioned, particularly if there's mental illness involved, that's where you start to seek therapy and you follow what your therapist says. Just like if you have to keep records, if it becomes severe and have to get legal, then you follow the advice of a lawyer. Every lawyer I've ever talked to, every therapist I've ever talked to, particularly when it deals with narcissists, don't engage, don't ever talk about them. Not specifically. Narcissists are going to think anything that you say is about them. And so particularly when they're going through combing your social media, posting elsewhere about things, because what they do, don't engage. Report all abuse. Others can help. So let your friends report the abuse too. Lock your personal accounts if you start to feel unsafe. Lock them all until you feel safe again. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And contact authorities, starting a paper trail. If you need to, contact authorities. Seek the advice of lawyers and therapists to try to help you deal with that. When dealing with narcissists, let's kind of go back to the chat here, and I'm going to talk a bit more about this, and then we'll probably wrap up soon. When dealing with narcissists, particularly ones who have decided to rage on you, it is best to ignore them. And this part's hard, and to not care. You have to not care. As difficult as this can be, narcissists rely heavily on engagement on any level. It can be positive or negative. They will twist what they can as they have had their fantasy world shaken, and will retaliate for their hurt feelings from criticism, leaving them, questioning them, and refuting any of their claims. It is important to block online these individuals and their friends in some cases, as they can be used as tools to harm you through triangulation. Do not post anything to incite or bait the raging narcissist, as they will see this as continued engagement. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. They want the attention. Don't give it to them. Much like the term "don't feed the trolls," this applies here. If they get no response, they will eventually move on. There will be flare-ups from time to time, as they will try again to bait for attention. There will always be flare-ups, but ignore and keep going. However, if they're particularly toxic and abusive, keep a paper trail, make a note on whatever file you have, update that police report. I do, and keep going. So if they become particularly toxic in your life, get professional help to cope with it. That's okay. Seek legal advice and consider filing a police complaint. In most cases, they will just go away if you starve them of the oxygen of attention. In most cases, they'll go away. But the ones that are particularly awful and are trying to hurt your livelihood by damaging your online reputation, and you're losing money because you've lost your job or things like that, before it gets to that point, keep a paper trail, keep screenshots of what they're saying. And here's the thing, you don't have to read the screenshots. If something is particularly troubling to you, and that's something that I had to learn when I was going through with the worst online, the worst case scenario with my online stalker, my friends would just look out for me and screenshot stuff. And then they would send it to me. I'd put it in a file. I don't have to read it. I can set aside time when I'm ready to sit there and put it together in the file, but you don't have to read it all the time. Your friends can just keep that information for you as they see it. So that's one way to kind of cope until you're ready to sit and deal with it. So communicate with your friends, the ones that you trust, and say, hey, can you keep an eye out on this person? Screenshot the stuff and send it to my email for me. You don't have to look at it right away. You don't have to look at their timeline. You can just ignore. Silence is the best course of action when it comes to narcissists, because they want from you. In most cases, the police will tell you to take some time away from the internet. But the point is if they get to where they're calling your job and harassing you there, you've already started a complaint with the police. It is pretty awful. And there are some cases where it's gotten to the point to where women have actually been killed by men that were stalking and harassing them. And the police already knew about it. Hopefully, with all of that particular press that came out with that news, the police are doing something better about it. So let's see. And you guys have been awesome. This has been an hour and a half. What have we talked about? Let's kind of look at our sum up here. Online narcissists. What are they? We talked about how does it apply online? What do they do? And how you can protect yourselves. Just keep excellent records and just not care. just not care. If it's not somebody that is worth my time, if it's not somebody that I respect, if it's not somebody that I know has an interest in me being better as a person, then I don't listen at all to their criticism. Yes, and ScientistMel also, if you need to vent, go to someone you trust, never vent in public. A narcissist will feed off of that and will be encouraged to do more. That is absolutely true. Vent privately, or if you have a locked account where they're not around, vent privately to your friends on your locked accounts, but not on your public account. So I'm so glad you guys enjoyed this. Let's take a look at all of my sources. Also check out pewresearch.org, online harassment 2017. I didn't put that here, but the stuff you can check out: the relationship between addictive use of social media, narcissism, and self-esteem. Findings from a large national survey. There's another one, narcissism and social networking behavior, a meta-analysis. Who do you troll and why? That's the dark triad personalities and online trolling behaviors towards popular and less popular Facebook profiles. You can check out that. Men more likely to be online trolls due to narcissism. I don't have the author of that there, but that's an article. That's not a peer-reviewed journal. While women use social media with pro-social motives, men tend to be antisocial. That is a online article, not a peer-reviewed article. The next peer-reviewed is, do narcissists enjoy visiting social networking sites? It depends on how adaptive they are. That's peer-reviewed article. Tweet this. A uses and gratifications perspective on how active Twitter use gratifies the need to connect with others. That's a peer-reviewed article. Facebook addiction disorder among German students, a longitudinal approach. That is a peer-reviewed article. Narcissistic traits and explicit self-esteem. The moderating role of implicit self-view, peer-reviewed article. The dark triad, the dark side of human personality. I believe that is on Elsevier. You can check that out. The Mayo Clinic breaks down narcissistic personality disorder pretty well. Online social networking and addiction, a review of the psychological literature. That's a peer-reviewed article. And the last two are from Psychology Today, 8 signs of narcissistic rage and its destructive consequences, and how to spot narcissistic abuse. So, yes, these are all my different sources. Where can you find me? You can find me everywhere on the internet. So I actually do I do, go through a lot of time and put together lots of reputable resources when it comes to things that I talk about. You can check it out. You can find me on ScientistMel.com if you want to download the slides. My site's working now, so I'm going to update the website with all the slides from my shows. You can download this, look it up yourself. Patreon.com/ScientistMel. I'm on Periscope. I'm on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. I'm also on DLive. And my patrons, that starts at just $1 a month. I do have an audio podcast, #HeyScientistMel. They get their own RSS feed there. Now that my website is working again, I will be posting more audio versions of like Audacity and shows like this, to where you can kind of take me along with you without it eating up your bandwidth, and your data. So you'll be able to just get the audio versions of all my shows. So do check that out. Thank you guys. And yes, pewresearch.org 2017 online harassment survey. That was one that I didn't list in my sources, but I'm telling you where you can go to check that out. And Sunday, Audacity with Doc will be with us. Do check him out on PvP tonight with Omni Eris. And also, so my brothers, my Bullinator brothers, the Geek Room, they have been longtime supporters of my show. Check them out. And also in Hannibal and Monty, go check out their show. They appear on my shows often, and they're going to start putting some of my Audacity commercials on their show, so that'll be a lot of fun. And in December, guys, I'm going to give a swag bag to the person who has the most Minions points. So that way you can kind of check that out. So yes, I'm so excited you guys are here. I feel like maybe I should read out of Mr. Rogers so we can do something positive before we sign off. The courage to be yourself.
Before you do
What's
that,
up?
Mel?
Yes.
Were you going to mention Nervardia?
Nervardia, yes. Thank you so much for that. I just hit myself in the head with Mr. Rogers' book because I'm just like, oh my God. All right, so the 20th, Wednesday, this week in BS returns. Nervardia is going to be on, and we're going to just have a chat about all kinds of just, bad science. I'm not certain what we're going to talk about, but yes, Nervardia will be on the show on Wednesday. I think that's 5 p.m. Central. And yes, do check out my shop. I have a whole lot of stuff. We're making new merchandise there all the time, and I'm trying to reorganize it to where you can click on items, types of items, rather than just things associated with stuff. So yes, I do have a Blocked by a series where I take poor online behavior and turn it into something positive by donating to charities. So do check that out if you like. And my swag bag will have merch from the store in December. So those of you, the person with the highest amount of Mel's Minions points, you get that from watching and from playing along with us on Worldacity. I am going to start having more, I think maybe like a challenge on here too, like a little trivia challenge to where you can earn points for getting right answers, And so, Mr. Rogers, here, the courage to be ourselves, and to self-reflect, right? The world according to Mr. Rogers, okay? Discovering the truth about ourselves is a lifetime's work, but it's worth the effort. Don't be afraid to self-reflect. Find out what your weaknesses are. Get help if you need it. It's completely fine, and it's okay. And it's okay. You're gonna do awesome. And with that, I'm gonna say, you always make each day special for me. You know how, by just your being you. I'll see you guys tomorrow on Worldacity. Sending squishy science hugs. Bye. Thank you for being here.